Hey everybody, Kenny here. So a few things before we get started. First is that, as you can see, I'm recording this before the reveal of the new league. So whatever the new league is going to be is irrelevant to the builds that I'm presenting. Second is that this is going to be the first set of videos that I'm going to be recording without my noise gate. So I'm not sure how this is going to end up sounding. So these are kind of an experiment, just to see like if it's okay for me to record this way now. Also, as always, this is a very casual Path of Exile channel. I do not make builds for people who plan on dumping hundreds of hours into a single league. This is not the content for you. Like, you know, there's plenty of people out there who make that kind of content. I'm not one of them. I make builds for people who only really have like maybe 30 plus hours to spend on a league. And, you know, if they're like really addicted to it, maybe they'll do a full 100 hours in a single league. You know, like that's really the the people that I'm making this for. Like people who, you know, they don't really have the time to go and like look up like, you know, oh, what skills are doing something that I might want to play around with. You know, like that's really what my builds are for. Like it is not for the really hardcore audience. And with that out of the way, let's get on with the premise for this series of builds. So ever since they've been added to the game, I have been on the hunt for the new transfigured gems. You know, I just do regular runs of the labyrinth whenever I have a little time. So as of this recording, I have about 2/3 to 3/4 of all of the transfigured gems that are currently in the game. And all of these builds are going to be based around the ones that I found to be the most interesting that I played around with. And with that, let's move on to the build. So unlike the other builds that I'm going to be covering for this league, this is actually going to be a double build video. And the reason for that isn't that I find these builds really all that similar. It's just that I feel that from an observer's perspective, that it'll look like they're playing very similarly. And so just because of that, I decided just to compile these into a single build video, just to make it that, you know, it doesn't feel like I posted two different builds that have a similar theme. Even though personally, like, I feel that they're very different. Once again, I feel like they're very different builds, but they do play kind of similarly.
Pleased with yourself? Feel all high and mighty, a powerful god slayer.
When I'm ready, and not before.
Now, before I explain the build, allow me to just quickly dispel any negative thoughts that may be going on here. This is an edited video, which means that everything you're seeing is a narrative that I control. I decide what goes in this video. So the deaths you saw in the gameplay showcase, I left in there intentionally. I could absolutely have just done a run of a map where, I played well and there weren't any issues. But this is not a channel based around showing elite gameplay. This is not a channel based around tackling pinnacle content. This is a very casual channel. Path of Exile is a challenging game, and sometimes you pick a map where the boss is possessed and you get stumped. It happens. I don't want anyone to feel discouraged by seeing that kind of thing. And if anyone is actually sincerely disrespectful to you for the fact that you die in a game of Path of Exile, you probably shouldn't be talking to those people. Now, for the build itself, obviously the main thing we have going here is that we are running the Transfigured Gem, Summon Flame Golem of the Meteor. Now, by having the max quality that I have here, it makes it that we have better cooldown recovery, which is nice to have. So, we get our golems up more often, we're able to cast them much faster, and the way we're supporting it is that I'm using Elemental Army support, which makes it that our minions go and cause exposure based on the damage type they deal, and of course these are fire golems, and so they deal fire damage. And then I'm also supporting it with Guardian's Blessing and Haste. Now, the aura that you support your golem with doesn't matter. I'm supporting this Summon Flame Golem of the Meteor with Guardian's Blessing and Haste because these boots don't have any movement speed on them. That's the only reason. You could honestly do this with any aura in the game. The extra attack speed, sure, that's nice, but that's not how we're really using the skill. You saw that we're actively seeing a group of enemies, we cast our golem, they crash down, we rush in, we rush past, we do it again. You turn around, do it again. that's the playstyle that I like to use for this character. But you could go and swap that out with a Malevolence gem to increase the amount of damage over time that you're dealing using the golems. Because when they crash down, that's a fire area that is causing burning ground. That is something that you can take advantage of. So there's nothing wrong with trying to go for that. And the reason that we are using this combination is that as an Elementalist, if you choose this Ascendancy, there is an upgrade right here, the Legion of the Primordial. This is the only one of the Ascendancy passives that actually matter for this build. By having this allocated, when your golems die, they're resummoned automatically after 4 seconds. Which means that we can turn on our aura, they start dying, and then they automatically resummon after 4 seconds. Which means that if you are running around, you don't really have to think about actually summoning them yourselves. But obviously you're seeing here, they came back and then our aura went away because they all died at the same time. So the way I always do it, and you saw at the start of the gameplay showcase, when I start my aura, then I just start summoning them kind of spaced out. And then by doing that, you make it that they're always resummoning themselves. So they'll die, and then they're each on their own separate timer to be resummoned. And so you'll just see, they'll just be constantly, running around, doing their golem thing, and then just showing up on their own as you're running around. So you can use this build both passively and actively. like the passive, like I like the passive things. That way, you know, like I can just like kind of look around to open up chests and stuff. But then, you know, like if there's an actual enemy that requires my attention, I can go active and just start manually summoning them. You know, and doing the playstyle that I mentioned. The other important part of the build is that we are supporting the flammability curse with blasphemy, so that we have a curse aura that is always up. And it's just a very nice build that just like, you know, like feels very comfortable to play around with. Like in terms of gear, like I'm wearing primarily armor and energy shield, but this helmet is armor evasion. It doesn't really matter what I'm actually wearing here. Like my goal wasn't to really be supporting any specific type of like equipment fantasy. Like it was just to be able to wear all of the gems that I needed for the build. That's the only thing that the things that I'm wearing with this character serve, is just to make sure that I can use the skills I want to use, and that defensively I'm not doing too poorly. I mean, obviously, like, you know, we could be doing better, but this isn't bad. Passively, like took a run down to the Scion area to get the passive skills that let you reserve less of your mana when you use a curse aura. Obviously invested a lot in minion damage wherever I could, and minion attack and cast speed. And by getting lots of minion attack and cast speed, we also are able to take advantage of spiritual command, which makes it that we're able to summon our flame golems even faster. Then both this cluster here for curses, we're in here for the last rites to make it that enemies that we curse have reduced life regeneration, and this regeneration cluster over here, we're in for the recovery mastery, that nearby enemies have reduced life regeneration. So that way, enemies just aren't regenerating life. I don't like it. I'm never going to like it. I'm always going to have stuff in my builds that gets rid of it. And then just grabbing as much cast speed as I can, so that way I can summon my golems as quickly as I want to, and then grabbing as many additional golems as I can. So having Golem Commander and the extra increases to the golem buffs, they don't really matter. That's why I was saying that only Legion of the Primordial really makes a difference. But by going for Elementalist, you get an additional golem. But the bonus to the golem buffs doesn't really do anything for you, because this particular version of flame golems doesn't actually do anything for you. You know, like it doesn't, like, you know, they don't give you a buff like the other version does. So, you know, you're taking this more for the fact that, you know, like they're immune and you get an extra golem. You know, immune to elemental damage and you get an extra golem. And then I took Bastion of the Elements just for the extra damage shield, but it's not really a big deal to actually have that. Like I said, you know, like these two are the only things that matter. With the new league, there could be things in here that you might change the focus. You know, like there might be some changes that you may have to be aware of that make it that some of these things don't work as well. But like I said, the only things that matter for what I've shown here are what I've mentioned. You know, there's other stuff here, like, you know, more life, more stats, more defenses. You know, but, you know, like, it's up to you, like, what you want to focus on. You know, if you want your character to be more evasion heavy, more energy shield heavy, more life heavy, you know, like, put your points where you want to put them. I'm just showing you, like, what makes it that this particular version of what I'm doing, like, what makes that work for me. But, you know, as always, you know, like, if you are more comfortable playing a different way, play a different way. And nothing wrong with that. And I'm using Frostblink as my escape skill, you know, like, and also to, like, kind of do some extra damage by diving into a group of enemies. since it's good for that as well. Again, this isn't a major part of the build, it's just the travel skill that I had on this character. Alright, so let's move on to the next one. So with that, you can kind of see what I meant about the two builds being kind of similar in how they play despite being completely different. Because this is clearly a self-casting build where we are the ones performing the actions, and the other is a minion build. But like in terms of like how they play, it's very similar. Like we're running in, we're doing big splash fire damage, but they're done in different ways. So with this character, the focuses are that we are using flame blast of contraction. So normally this is a skill that kind of starts small and builds up over time, and then when it gets really big, you let go and you hit a bigger area. But in this case, you start off big and then you get smaller, and the smaller it gets, the more damage it does. So it's actually incredibly satisfying to play. It's probably like one of like the best alternative versions of any of the skills that I've played so far. Is this transfiguration of flame blast. It's super fun because like doing this, like it feels like you're like the hand of God when you're doing this. like you're just running around. You're like, oh, there's a group over there. Boom, 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 boom. Just like these huge areas, just instantly. And you're like, if it's a normal pack of enemies, then you're just like almost guaranteed wiping them out immediately. And it's just really cool. It's really cool. And then the other transfigure gem we're using here is that we are running Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion. Regular Righteous Fire. The thing that like really kind of limits that for build potential is that you really need to have a build where your maximum fire resistance and your life regeneration are at a point where you can afford to burn for the amount that does. So the regular version you burn for your life, this version you burn based on your mana. So obviously like you'll generally have more life than you have mana. You have more maximum life than you have maximum mana. Now obviously you can definitely create a build where you have a massive mana pool. But in this case, like we're not focused on having huge amounts of mana. So we're able to support this fairly reasonably. And most builds will be able to do this. This is a very easy to support gem because of the fact that the amount of life you need to regenerate in order to turn on your Righteous Fire and just make it that you're always fully sustainable. Like this is much easier to pull off than with regular Righteous Fire. The trade-off is that regular Righteous Fire also gives you a bonus to your spell damage, which you do not get from this version of Righteous Fire. This version of Righteous Fire instead actually scales off of your spell damage. So the more spell damage you have in your build, the more damage you're able to do with your Righteous Fire. So what I decided to do with this is that I'm supporting my Flame Blast of Contraction with increased area of effect and faster casting, and Righteous Fire of Arcane Devotion with increased area of effect, but I'm supporting both of these with Inspiration. Because with Inspiration, once you have spent enough mana, then you have increased damage from the Inspiration charges. And so unlike regular Righteous Fire, I can do this, get a bunch of Inspiration charges, and now my Righteous Fire is actually stronger. So you actually have a pretty good way to alternate between having passive damage and having active damage. And it's just a lot of, it's a very cool synergy that I very highly recommend. Like for what this is, the only thing that really matters is that, we're dual wielding wands that give us lots of spell damage. That way we both have more damage to our main spell, and we're making it that our Righteous Fire is even more potent. And anytime we do any kind of investment into our mana, we actually improve the amount of damage this does tremendously. So, so like even like little bits of increased mana will make you do so much more damage with this than you would think you'd be able to get out of a passive spell like this without being like, like super overpowered with like incredible gear. And gear wise, like this character, the only thing that matters is that they have these 2 wands on. Like the rest of the gear, like this is armor, energy shield, this is armor evasion, this is full armor, this is full armor. Passively, the main things that like really make this build work are that we have Ramako Sun's Light, and what Ramako Sun's Light does is if we're stationary, then we reduce enemy fire resistance specifically to damage over time, which is what our Righteous Fire does. And then by going down into this fire cluster here, while these are wastes of investments because they increase fire damage with attack skills, which we're not using, by getting Settling Ash, we make it that when we've stopped for 2 seconds, then we cover nearby enemies in ash, and ash, as you can see there, makes it that enemies have less movement speed and they take increased fire damage. So, so like anytime you want to deal more damage, all we need to do is stop for a couple seconds, and then we can keep moving. Like we just massively increase the amount of damage we do to something just by staying still for a second, which obviously in a game like Path of Exile is dangerous, but like, you can see the value in doing something like that in a game like this. Like you run into a group, you stop for a second, like you're setting up, like, and then it's not like you need to be inactive while you're doing it. So you run in, like, you're just exploding constantly, and then you run away. And then I really just focused on getting as much fire damage and fire damage over time as I could, as well as also getting the recovery mastery to reduce enemy life regen, because as I said, I will always get rid of it because I hate it. Hate it so much. And then lots of elemental damage, some fire penetration from here, more fire damage, and increased area for fire damage, and then more fire damage multiplier, as well as going for all of the spell damage from over here in the witch area. Yeah, but aside from that, like you can take whatever like you feel like fits your playstyle best. The reason for the Iron Will is that we have a nice amount of strength, and so it just gets us some additional spell damage on top of our equipment, so that our Righteous Fire can be more effective and that our spell can be more effective. And I'm using the Summon Golem just for the extra regen, as well as Vitality 3 extra regen. And since we have access to automation and call to arms now, like I have them going and just regularly casting Immortal Call and Enduring Cry for me. So I'm regularly just building up endurance charges and then spending them to get some more survivability. So it's a nice like passive way to keep yourself up. I highly recommend just trying that out. Like regardless of what you want to do, I recommend doing that just for the extra survival sake. Yeah, but that is the build. Not much to it, but to do it. Thanks everybody for stopping by and checking me out. If you're enjoying the tips that I presented here, I appreciate doing YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, maybe share the video with a friend. Until next time, Ve Victus, Piracy Damaris, and bye.